When preppers talk about a crisis, the question's often framed like this: bug in or bug out, stay or go. And to be fair, sometimes that really is the question. Often, though, that's too crude. It assumes that one location has to do everything, or that one decision just settles the matter. Real households are messier than that, and real disruptions are too. What I want to talk about here is the missing middle. This isn't even a new idea. Sending children away from danger while family members stayed put happened in Second World War. Different people, different places, different roles. The point here is not to over-dramatize modern life by comparing everything to wartime. It's simply to note that split households and partial relocation are not weird inventions from prepper YouTube. The space between full bug in and full bug out, the hybrid arrangements, split roles, borrowed functions and partial relocations are what a lot of normal people are far more likely to use. Bug in or bug out is useful shorthand. The problem starts when it hardens into a false dichotomy. Don't only think about where you are, but also which functions still work at home and what can be better done somewhere else. The useful question is whether the place still lets you sleep, cook, wash, keep warm, look after vulnerable people, stay on top of work, charge what needs charging, and live with some dignity rather than merely existing there. That's a more useful way of thinking about it, because many crises are partial, uneven, and evolving. They don't arrive with a cinematic trumpet blast and force you into one dramatic decision. They degrade over time in ways that affect different people and different households differently. Most homes do not go from fully functional to completely uninhabitable in one dramatic step. You may have somewhere that's still safe to sleep in, but awkward for hygiene, childcare, work, or caring for an elderly relative. That kind of partial failure does not always push you towards a full relocation. Often it creates a more selective kind of movement. And once a house starts failing in pieces, the question's no longer just, are we leaving? It becomes, who might need to go and for what reason? Leaving is not always about panic, and it's not always about abandoning home. Another venue may simply be better able to carry part of the burden for a while. It may have heat, water, power, internet, or a working shower. A vulnerable person may cope there better. Morale at home may be sliding, and a child or elderly parent may benefit from a warmer, calmer, more normal environment. Home may still be worth keeping, but no longer able to do every job for every person. That's important because going is often presented in prepper circles as one dramatic act, like a final break with normal life. In reality, it may be much smaller and much more targeted than that. Sometimes the reason for going is not that another place can help you, but that you are needed somewhere else. Grandma may need support rather than offering it. Uncle Billy may need another pair of hands with repairs. And a sick relative may need care. Another household may be coping badly and needs someone more capable, calmer, or more practical to steady things. That movement may be quite limited. One person goes for 2 nights, one person goes with the kids while another stays with the house. Someone heads elsewhere during the day and comes back at night. Sometimes someone goes because that's where the need is. And this is where it becomes more interesting, because while one person may have every reason to go, another may be far more useful staying put. Staying is not always stubbornness, and it's not always macho nonsense about holding the fort. Sometimes staying is simply the most rational use of the person that's left. Work may keep someone in place. Jobs do not stop because home life has become awkward. Animals, dependents, or a vulnerable person who cannot easily be moved may keep someone there as well. So can the property itself, if it still contains the supplies, the routine, the paperwork, the deliveries, the freezer, the tools, the medication, and the basic structures of daily life. Repairs or utilities may need managing, or there may simply be a need to prevent secondary loss. A house that is awkward but salvageable can become a much bigger and more expensive problem if no one's there to keep an eye on leaks, contractors, deliveries, or the general slow drift into avoidable chaos. Travel itself may be risky, awkward, or too expensive. And sometimes the person who stays is simply the one most capable of keeping things running because they know the systems or can improvise, can manage the workaround, and can stop the whole thing just drifting into chaos. In a larger crisis, there may be wider duties too, whether that's civil defence, military service, volunteering, or essential work. So sometimes someone stays because that's where the responsibility is. Once you put these two ideas side by side, something becomes obvious. These are not really stay factors and go factors. They're responsibilities and needs, and they can pull in different directions depending on where they fit. Care responsibilities are a good example. You may stay because granddad's here, or you may go because granddad's there. Repairs are another. Your own house may be the one that's failing, or Uncle Billy's place may have become the priority repair site and need help. Work can do the same thing. One person may be anchored locally by their job, while the rest of their household relocates temporarily. What matters is where the duty actually sits. That changes things because once you see it properly, the middle ground stops looking vague. It starts looking something much more concrete. In practice, that may mean staying at home but charging devices elsewhere, or sleeping at home but showering at the gym or at work. It may mean using the library or a cafe for internet, cooking at someone else's, moving one person instead of the whole household, sending children or an elderly relative somewhere else while the adults keep the home base running, or shuttling food, medicine, batteries, clothing, or paperwork between locations, rather than fully abandoning one for the other. That's what I mean by distributed support. It's an extended household meeting its needs through a network of people and places, rather than expecting one location to do everything. That does not mean every node will always be available. Grandma may have power, or she may not. The library may be open, or it may not. The point is not that every option will work in every crisis. The point is to think in advance about how you might use whatever is available, if and for so long as it is available. Home may still provide shelter, storage, familiarity, and security, but Grandma's house may provide heat, sockets, and a shower. A neighbour may offer a kettle, a spare ring on the hob, or just a bit of temporary help with childcare. Once you start thinking in terms of a network like that, one obvious question follows. Are there any of those places you could quietly strengthen now? With a private support node such as family or friends, that may mean supplying a few useful items, easing an obvious pressure point, or simply making sure you're not planning to lean on a place that's badly set up to carry the load. With public or semi-public nodes such as work, the gym, or the library, the equivalent is not supplying them yourself, but understanding them properly. Know the routes, the surrounding area, the opening patterns, and what each place would and would not realistically do for you. Preparedness is sometimes a network, not a fortress. Of course, that middle ground is going to look very different depending on one simple fact: where your people and resources actually are. If all of this sounds easy, if support is 5 or 10 minutes away, it looks rather different if your nearest useful relative is in another town or the next county over. And a lot of families are like that. They're spread out geographically. Parents in one place, adult children in another, siblings somewhere else again. The support may exist, but it's not necessarily close. That changes the shape of the middle ground. If Grandma's 5 minutes away, popping over to charge some power banks and have a shower is one thing. If she's 90 minutes away, that starts to look more like a full relocation. So the middle ground looks different depending on your map. And distance is not the only constraint. Getting somewhere is only part of the problem. The other is what that place can realistically take on. Even if a support location is available, that does not mean it can support everything. It might have enough room, patience, and warmth for one vulnerable relative, but not for the whole extended family plus the dog. And even when a support node does help, it often helps in only one or two ways. You may solve hygiene without solving privacy, solve internet without solving food, or solve power without solving sleep. The real question might not be, can we go there? It might be, who can go there, for how long, and for what purpose? Once you start thinking in those terms, you can see why hybrid plans are often sensible, but not frictionless. The middle ground is often practical. It's also often a faff. There's travel time, there's fuel, there's coordination, there's remembering who has what charger, who took the medication, who has the key, who's bringing the dog food, who's picking up the child, who's staying where tonight, and who actually knows the plan. There is split attention, there's a burden on hosts, there's the risk of forgotten kit, mixed messages, dead phones, and cross wires. There's also the simple fact that the support node may fail too. The cafe closes, the library shuts, the gym changes its hours. The relative loses power as well, and the workplace stops being available. That's why the middle ground can be practical without being easy. And that's exactly why these plans need a bit more thought than we'll just work it out on the day. If a household may end up operating between locations, then some things need deciding before the pressure's on. Who goes first and under what trigger? Who stays and why? What items are always ready for shuttling? What absolutely must remain at home? How are you communicating if people are split? How long is the arrangement sustainable before it starts to become a burden or a mess? And what's the fallback if the support location also loses capacity? You don't need a 10-page doctrine for this, but a bit of thought goes a long way. If one person may need to go and another stay, then it helps to know in advance what would actually go with them. Call it a go bag if you like, but keep it simple. It's not some new doctrine, it's just an ordinary bag or an ordinary group of items that would move quickly if one person needed to spend a night or two elsewhere. What goes in it will vary from household to household, which is exactly the point. If the household may be split across locations, then communication wants thinking through as well. It helps to have a default group chat, a rough check-in time, and some fallback if signal is patchy or batteries are low. If the gym or workplace might become your hygiene fallback, then perhaps you should already know what that routine looks like. If public Wi-Fi might become important, then maybe you should know where it actually exists nearby. If a relative's house is a likely support node, then it's worth being honest now about what it can and cannot reasonably absorb. In some cases, it's also worth quietly strengthening that location in advance. That might mean supplying a few useful items now, easing known pressure points, or making sure that if you ever do lean on that place, you're not arriving empty-handed into a predictable shortfall. And test your preps works as much here as anywhere. Nothing you do as part of your plan should be done for the first time in a crisis. The easiest way to see whether this thinking really holds up is to apply it to a few situations. With a power cut, a short outage in a house that is still warm enough may mean everyone stays put. But if it drags on, you may sleep at home, but charge devices elsewhere, assuming somewhere else still has power. If not, that option drops out and you lean on whatever else is still open to you. And if one elderly relative is struggling with a cold, they may go to someone else's while the rest of the household remains, provided that place is actually in better shape. A heating failure in winter may leave the house safe but unpleasant. One person may stay to manage contractors, pets, and the property, while someone else goes somewhere warmer for a couple of nights. A burst pipe may not require a full relocation at all. It may just mean temporary support with hygiene, laundry, or one room becoming unusable. If one house has power and another does not, that does not automatically mean everyone piles into one location. It may mean charging runs, freezer support, a temporary stay for one person, or a few functions migrating while the rest remain in place. If the better supplied house loses power as well, then the plan changes again. The whole point is to use what exists while it exists, rather than refusing to think about partial options until they're guaranteed forever. And that's where all of this lands in the real world, especially here in Britain. Most British households do not have a dacha or a retreat in the woods. What they often have is something much more ordinary: mum's house, grandma's house, work sockets, gym facilities, a cafe with internet, a library with Wi-Fi, a neighbour with a kettle, and a bit of spare goodwill, and a friend with freezer space. That may not sound ideal. It may not sell quite as many fantasy bug out bags, but for a lot of people, that's what real resilience actually is. Not one perfect refuge, not one dramatic decision, a patchwork of support, used sensibly without chaos, confusion, or embarrassment. Bugging in and bugging out are still useful concepts, but they're not the whole story. A lot of households in a lot of real situations will end up using partial relocation, borrowed functions, split roles, temporary support nodes, and hybrid plans. So the grown-up question is not just, do we stay or do we go? It's, what still works here? What can be supported elsewhere? And who is best where? Preparedness is not always about choosing between staying and leaving. Often it's about learning how to split people, places, and functions without losing control of the situation. If you want to be better prepared for real life, not just for fantasy versions of it, the middle ground is worth thinking about. Chances are, if things ever do get awkward, you may not just be making one grand decision. You may be making a series of smaller ones, well or badly. And the more thought you've given to that missing middle in advance, the less chaotic these decisions are likely to be. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and all the usual YouTube rituals. And let me know in the comments, what's a support node that you've got near you that you probably don't think about enough? A library, a gym, a relative, a neighbour, work, or something else. Thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to our next video.